You are in the ring with Héctor Colon, 7-time national boxing champion turned nonprofit president and CEO. Héctor knocks out the big issues facing social services today with high-impact leaders from around the U.S. In the Ring is a creation of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan and produced by No Studios. And now, here's Héctor Colon.
Hello, and welcome to In the Ring with Héctor Colon, the podcast that knocks out the challenges facing the social services sector and the people we serve. I am your host, Héctor Colon. In the ring with me today is Krish, Omara, Vignarajah. Welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation.
Great. First, a little bit about Krish. Krish serves as the president and CEO of Global Refuge, one of the largest faith-based nonprofits with 600 employees, 59 partner offices serving more than 50,000 refugees and other immigrants annually. It was Krish's personal immigrant experience, fleeing from Sri Lanka with her family decades ago, that sparked a lifelong commitment to public service. Krish works tirelessly to help newcomers find safety, support, and share in the American dream. This is evident from her role as policy director for First Lady Michelle Obama. Congratulations, that's exciting. To her strategic work as a senior advisor at the State Department on Foreign Policy and now as Global Refuge CEO. Krish leads Global Refuge with a heart of an ally, the fight of an advocate, and the insight of someone who knows firsthand the difference of a warm welcome can make. She has been recognized as one of the Daily Record's top 100 women and most admired CEOs and the Hill's changemakers. Okay, Krish, you ready for round one?
Excited for it.
Let's go, champ. Tell me a little bit about your story. I shared a little bit about your bio, but go a little deeper. And how did you become the president and CEO of Global Refuge?
I was lucky enough that my parents had the courage and the willingness to flee Sri Lanka soon after I was born because we were part of the ethnic and religious minority and to come to the U.S. When we came, my parents had no jobs, just a couple $100 in their pockets and two very young kids in their arms. My brother was 3, I was 9 months old. And it was really that willingness to, take that step to ensure that we had a better, brighter, safer future that brought us to Baltimore as my dad got a job as a Baltimore City public school teacher. And it was the welcome of churches, temples, who helped us, weather that first winter, coming from a tropical island when we had never seen a flake of snow. So I grew up in Maryland, had, the good fortune of being the daughter of 2 educators, which meant education was a real focus. So I went to Yale College and then Oxford on a Marshall Scholarship and then back to Yale for law school. Joined the workforce, practiced law for a couple of years, and then joined the Obama administration, served as senior advisor to Secretary Clinton and Secretary Kerry, and then served as Michelle Obama's policy director, as you mentioned. And then when I finally thought I was going to get a little bit of a break after 5 grueling years, an executive search firm approached me about serving as CEO of this great nonprofit organization. At the time, it felt like the height of this war on immigration and immigrants. And it felt like a real calling to be able to pay it forward to the newest generation of immigrants who are very much fleeing for many of the same reasons.
I am the first non-Lutheran, non-pastor, non-Norwegian to run LSS of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan in our 142-year history. So I also know that you are the first to be the leader of non-Lutheran leader of Global Refuge. Tell us a little bit about what your experience has been like thus far.
Yeah, I know when we first met, we spoke about what a unique experience it is. And Look, I think like you, I am grateful that the board gave me this chance to serve. It really does feel like a blessing. I also know that there are certain growing pains that come along with that in terms of, just understanding the history of the organization, making sure that we are true to the very faith-based nature of our work. I strongly believe that this is an asset, a real strength of the organization rather than a weakness. Of course, we are having this conversation at a time when, unfortunately, even faith-based organizations are under attack. And so I think it is really important to highlight that for most of the refugee resettlement agencies, for example, they do have a history of a faith group supporting the work. And so I think that is important to highlight that immigration is so valuable and so central to our history as a country, in part because it is a matter of faith for so many people.
Thank you so much. And yes, I too am so honored and privileged to be able to in a position to run this organization with its reputation, its credibility, and its legacy over 142 years. It's really a privilege to be in this position to have the impact that we have in our respective organizations. How do you personally honor the Lutheran tradition in history in your role as CEO?
So I think some of it is just being guided by the fact that, in Matthew 25, it focused on welcoming the stranger. I think some of it is realizing that Jesus was a refugee. But in terms of the day to day work, I think it's about connecting to congregations. We have a close relationship with the ELCA. Historically, we've had a strong relationship with LCMS, the other Lutheran church. We really prided ourselves on being a pan-Lutheran organization. And I think that's where we continue to do the work in partnership with congregations and communities all across the country.
Great. So I know that you recently changed your name. What was the catalyst for that? And share a little bit about the process and the thinking behind that.
So this was something that was being discussed even before I arrived. I know in my first interviews with the board, the search committee, this came up as a topic that had been touched on. I think that the board was wise in recognizing that when you do something as dramatic as change, the name, the brand of the organization, that has to be thoughtful and data driven. So the board actually made a decision to engage a communications firm. That firm undertook a expansive survey to really connect with a range of stakeholders, whether that was former staff, donors, clients, to really understand the kind of like what were the strengths and weaknesses of the name Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Were there other names that communicated the values, vision, mission of the organization, but also invited those to work to conduct this work with us, alongside of us. And I'm sorry that my 1-year-old also is chiming in about how important this work is to do
Awesome.
collectively. But that's where I think it is so critical for Global Refuge to be very intentional in reaching out to congregations and reaching out to the national churches to say, our name may have changed, but our vision, our mission, our values have not, in terms of meeting the work of welcoming the stranger.
What have been, in your mind, the benefits that you have achieved thus far regarding the name change and some of the challenges? And so glad your daughter could join us.
Well, I think, one of our former board chairs described it well in saying, does the Lutheran identity of the organization, do you put that on the door or do you put that on the table?
Hmm.
And I think the concern of some was, if you put it on the door, are there some who may not knock on it, or some who may not feel invited to come in to have that in-depth conversation? So I think that for some of our donors who are longstanding, and we are so grateful to their support, they may have seen the name change and thought, well, this is jarring and disruptive. What does it mean? Are they no longer committed to the Lutheran identity of the organization? Has the nature of the work changed? And so we've had to really be focused on proactively explaining that, we need to alleviate those fears and doubts of whether this is a shift in anything but the name. But we've also found that there have been a number of clients who have said, we are so grateful because, we know that this work is ecumenical. And it's not just Christian faiths. During the Afghan evacuation, we resettled, over 10,000 Afghan allies. And so hearing from our clients, and now some of them are actually on staff, to say, we feel this is such a inclusive brand. I think that has been really helpful.
That's the end of round one, Krish. How you feeling so far?
Whew, asking some tough questions. I hope you're going to go easy on me in round two.
Oh, it gets tougher, Krish. You're doing great. But before we go into round two, I want to hear a message from our sponsor, M3 Insurance.
People today are at a higher risk of experiencing mental illness, housing insecurity, and substance abuse. Do you know the health of your employees, your communities? How can you step up your benefits to better address their well-being? M3 Insurance helps businesses see beyond basic benefits and support employees where they live. It's a meet them where they are approach that LSS delivers to their clients every day. M3 and LSS offer real solutions to now commonplace realities that strengthen employees and inspire communities to thrive. Test your employee benefit strategy now by going to m3ins.com.
Are you ready for round two?
I sure am.
Let's go, champ. Could you share with us the differences and similarities between refugees, the terms we hear in the news, such as illegal immigrants, undocumented individuals, and asylum seekers?
Yeah, it's such an important question because I do think, you turn on the TV or pick up a newspaper and a lot of these labels are being bandied about, and there are technical definitions. So a refugee is someone who crosses an international border. They apply through the UN or go directly to the U.S. Embassy, and they enter the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. When they arrive in the U.S., essentially their legal process is sort of a clear path forward in the sense that they enter as a refugee, they then can apply for their green card and are on a pathway to citizenship. By contrast, an asylee is someone who, when they arrive on U.S. soil, that is essentially the beginning of their process. They can't actually access, historically speaking, the asylum system until they have reached American soil. They will then apply for asylum. There's a credible fear interview, which is sort of an initial threshold, and then they'll wait. Sometimes that is a years-long process to determine whether they will actually receive legal relief.
Great, thank you. And I know the answer to this, but I want you to share, if you can, about illegal immigrants. Are you serving that population through this program?
Yeah, so, we always try to highlight that human beings are not illegal. It is true in our country that there certainly are undocumented immigrants. And Global Refuge has always advocated for a system that allows for people to enter through legal pathways. But it's also important to understand that when we're talking about those who are seeking asylum at the southern border, they are entering through a legal pathway, meaning they are raising an asylum claim. They are being processed through Customs and Border Protection in order to begin that legal process.
In what ways has this confusion impacted your work? Maybe donors, politicians in different states. Share a little bit about your experience there, and any advice you have to us working in this, doing this important work.
Well, we are so grateful to our partnership with you and LSS. I think the last few years has been hard for a different reason than the few years previous to that. During the Trump administration, obviously, we saw significant cuts in so many programs that we thought were really ill-founded, in the sense that refugee resettlement, for example, went from over 100,000 refugees to about 11,000 refugees. Refugee resettlement has been a bipartisan program. Historically speaking, we've received as many refugees under Republican administrations than Democratic ones. The last few years has been difficult because what we found was that one party was incredibly vocal in their anti-immigration, rhetoric and policies, and the other side, maybe it was a strategy, but essentially it was met with radio silence. And I think this is where, social service organizations like ours have very much had to be on the front lines to explain that immigration is a key part of our history, that we are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. And so our hope has been to continue to provide the programming as we engage on a policy level to realize that our system is dysfunctional. It needs to be fixed rather than see the fear-mongering that we've been seeing.
I agree with you. I think you hit it right on the nail that really, I think Republicans and Democrats have failed as it relates to comprehensive immigration reform, which, again, we're talking about refugees, a little different, but still in the broader discussion, I think we need to come together as a country and solve this issue, make it accessible, safe, but also legal. And currently, we have big challenges around that. What do you think are the top two barriers for refugees that could be solved right now if we had a magic wand?
So one of the biggest challenges we see is legal pathways. Right now, our immigration legal system is about as complex as our tax code, which means that it is very difficult to navigate. When sometimes critics say, well, they should come the right way, I think it's important to understand that, for the clients I speak to, they are trying to come the right way. But sometimes that pathway is dysfunctional, it's backlogged, it's essentially non-existent. And so I think having clearer, simpler legal pathways that actually work is beneficial to our country in terms of creating that orderly system that you described, but also creating something that's transparent, that immigrants can navigate without having to rely on, exploitative lawyers, or even worse, human smuggling operations. No one wants to see that. And then the second piece is just the challenges of affordable housing and finding a job. It's the challenges that Americans are experiencing. And just as we need to support our native-born Americans, we also need to invest in immigrants who become contributing members of our communities, because that is an investment that really pays a return in terms of the win-win nature of immigration.
Absolutely. I know this is truly remarkable that these individuals come here with $1,200 one time from the federal government, and organizations such as ours within 90 days get these individuals connected to housing, get their kids enrolled in school, get them connected to job training or employment. And for us, within 6 months, almost 90% of these individuals have employment, are on a path to citizenship, love the United States of America, and are really great citizens. So thank you for all you do to make this all happen at the national level, but then also partnering with us and others on the local level to have this impact. We need more workers, right? And this is a population. I just had a panel discussion with some major employers here in Wisconsin to talk about their experience hiring refugees, and it was great discussion. They said that these individuals are absolutely outstanding employees, and there had to been some accommodations on both sides to make sure that the effort was successful. But clearly, they're a workforce that those employers needed, and we're very excited to have them. What can we all do to move forward the support of refugees all across the nation?
Yeah, it's a great question to end this round on, because I think to thrive in this country, immigrants need, education, affordable housing, some of the things that we've talked about, like jobs, as you just described. And I think it's important to know that when we support them, they not only survive, but they thrive. They own 70,000 businesses, 70,000 homes, 22,000 businesses, 9.3 billion in spending power. They nationally start up 55% of our startups. And so I think the bottom line is, how can we all be ambassadors for the issue of immigration when they come to our communities. Greet them, speak with them, see if there's a way that you can connect and maybe, mentor an immigrant child, or, hire them. One of the things that I find, exactly to your comment about the business roundtable, is that one of the most impactful ways to change their lives is to give them the opportunity to uplift themselves economically.
Thank you so much. That completes this round. We're going to take a little break before going to the next round. Subscribe to In the Ring podcast now on YouTube. Like, follow, and share on social media and wherever you get your podcasts. Doing so will allow LSS to expand our reach and message so others within our sector can benefit from these important conversations. Let's go, champs. Are you ready for the final round?
Final round, excited.
Let's go, champ. You're doing great. So what is your 5-year vision for Global Refuge?
So I want Global Refuge to be globally recognized as a place that can support newcomers. I hope that Global Refuge can serve as that one-stop shop, knowing how difficult it can be for immigrants who have recently arrived to navigate a new country, in a new language, new neighborhoods, new communities. And I think this is where it's been so amazing to partner with amazing organizations like yours, because together I think we've really been able to offer that full continuum of care. But I also realize that, for some of our organizations, we really have to operate not just as nonprofits, but social enterprises, as advocacy organizations. So much of what we do is, combating disinformation. And so I think that's where I also believe that Global Refuge in the next few years needs to kind of fight for reasonable, measured policies, that we combat the negativity around immigrants, that we really fight fiction with fact.
So how can organizations like us that are in your network help you co-create that vision? What can we do to support you? And ultimately, the refugees that are fleeing from war and persecution, we are here to love them, to serve them, and to welcome them in our beautiful country.
Yeah. Well, I will say, very much since the first time we sat down together, I have very much felt this sentiment of partnership. You obviously know your clients in Wisconsin better than anyone else. You know the needs of the local community. You know the sentiment of how, Americans may feel, and how they are supported in this work of welcome. This is where I think part of it is being the national umbrella for so many local nonprofits that every day and for decades have done this incredible work. So I think this is a moment for us to really stand together, to provide the social services, to provide that long welcome in everything from, economic empowerment through landing jobs to even lending. That's something that we launched recently in offering micro business and personal loans. But I think it's collaborating together that we can ensure that so many of these newcomers do feel supported as they come to the U.S.
Do you have similar or different post-presidential election strategies if there's a Harris administration or a Trump administration?
So I found that, we had a CEO summit very recently, and it's not surprising that so many of us in these positions are undertaking a serious scenario planning, knowing that we are nonpartisan organizations, but we're obviously following presidential elections, and knowing that it will have a significant impact either way on our work. So what we are doing is contingency planning, ensuring that we are nimble, that we are able to pivot regardless, because of course this work is so important. And my hope is that part of that is ensuring that we diversify how we receive our resources, so that we are not as dependent on who serves in the federal government.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know when the prior Trump administration was in, a lot of organizations across the country ended up closing their doors because they couldn't be financially viable. For us, we had conversations here as well, but the donors really rose up, especially the church, and supported us so that we can sustain this program. We did have to right size, right? We did have to lay off some staff, but thankfully we were able to bring them back as a result of new refugees coming into our country. But the fact that we have to remain nimble is so important in our sector. You know, you can't operate in deficits, and that has an impact on our colleagues. It has an impact on our organization and then the broader community. So we have to be very business-like in how we approach that. I believe that's how we did it. We were successful, but we would not have happened if it wasn't for the generosity of our donors. I know that you have done a great job at raising dollars to support your efforts and to grow and expand your efforts, and even share some of that with our partners. You want to share a little bit more about that, and what has led to your success, and how has that benefited organizations such as ours in continuing to do this great work?
I appreciate that question, Hector, because I think you also have done an incredible job of realizing that part of meeting our mission is, of course, centered around how do we serve our clients. But part of meeting our mission is also how do we better inform Americans, corporations, foundations about the work of welcome, and make it accessible so that it isn't just them reading a story about a Ukrainian refugee family or an unaccompanied child that's arriving in the US, but they feel invested, that they feel like there is a way for them to get involved. So we've really tried to be outspoken about our work. We've tried to ensure that there are ways in which people can get involved. A great example of that is our Hope for the Holidays campaign coming up this holiday season, where you can actually write a card to someone who is in detention, who really may feel like, wow, this is such a hostile environment, so that they know that someone is really thinking about them. We've been able to provide toys to children, so that every child is able to celebrate in some way the winter holiday season. And then, of course, we've also tried to be outspoken about the work so that people, we got a $15 million grant from Mackenzie Scott, so that people understand what we do, who we are, and why this work matters so much.
Oh, thank you so much. And I want to go back to a challenge that we probably should have addressed in the previous round, and it's related to housing. And so, housing, affordable housing for our refugees is clearly a big challenge. I know for us, we used to operate a refugee program in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was just too much of a challenge in terms of not having the availability of affordable housing. So we ended up getting out of that. Milwaukee, there's more opportunities, but clearly it still remains a challenge. Do you have any thoughts about how, together as a collective, really this is a national issue, how we have more affordable housing, not only for refugees, but for the broader community that relies on that?
It is such an important question. And a few of the things that we've really tried to work on. First, I think it's important to stress that affordable housing would be a crisis, even if you took every single immigrant out of local communities. Part of what we are seeing is a limited inventory. You're seeing private equity firms, purchasing a lot of homes. You're seeing younger people have no access to entering the housing market. And so I think, what we're trying to figure out is how do we ensure that there aren't just concentrations of people in places that is unsustainable. What we really tried to work on with the State Department, with local governments at the state and municipal level, is trying to encourage people to be thoughtful on where they move. Is there a rural community that frankly has been gutted as a result of manufacturing industries, moving abroad, some of the terrible dynamics that we've seen as of late, where we could help, repopulate a community that needs a workforce that's vibrant. And Springfield has obviously been in the news. I think it's really important to understand that when we're talking about, tens of thousands of Haitians who moved, well, a significant part of that was because local leaders were able to recruit businesses to move to Springfield, and there was a need for employees. And so then there was an active recruitment of an immigrant community, and so many Haitians responded to that. So I think, just the final point I'll make is we need to have a real conversation about this. We need to expand the inventory of affordable housing. We need to make sure that we distribute the population in ways that are more thoughtful. And we need to really invest in urban planning so that we are thinking through how we're building. We're not just overdeveloping areas.
Great, Chris. You did awesome. That's the end of round 3. But before I let you go, I have a few questions, and I want to learn how you bob and weave and roll with the punches with these following questions. What do you do to decompress from your work?
So I love sports. So in particular, I am trying to cultivate a love of tennis in my 7-year-old so that I can find a tennis partner. My husband, unfortunately, played baseball. So every time I take him out onto the court, he's hitting home runs, which gets old pretty quickly. But I also love hugging. I love being in nature. To me, particularly being by water, maybe it's the tropical blood coursing through my veins, but it's just where I sort of find my peace.
Awesome. As a former boxer, I like punching that punching bag and releasing that stress. Would you share a favorite memory from your earlier days in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, so when I was very young, my family actually, bear in mind I was 9 months, right, when I left. But we actually went back to Sri Lanka when I was just a few years old. There had been a ceasefire. And as a result, my parents wanted to take advantage and traveled with us. But while we were there, tensions grew. And so there was a curfew imposed on the entire country. We at the time were in the north, and we needed to get back to the capital in order to take our flights back to the U.S. This was at the end of the summer. So we were pretty desperate, ended up renting bicycles. So my parents rode separate bicycles. We had someone who actually had loaded our suitcases onto another bicycle. And then we had someone who helped me and my brother. My responsibility was waving a white flag as we approached the government, the military checkpoints. I thought this was such a fun parade, and I thought this was such a great adventure. My parents were like, we are never going back with young kids. And so it took a while for us to return. But to me, it was, in my naive way, such an exciting road trip.
Oh, that's a cool story. Thank you for sharing that. What is your favorite inspirational quote?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. There's like a lot that are coming through my head.
It's not "Let's Go, Champ." You learned that one already.
Well, every time I read something, I think of a quote that was attributed to Mark Twain of, I apologize, I didn't have time to write something shorter. But no, I mean, I think there's a great quote that's basically, and maybe going into this presidential election cycle, it is darkest before the dawn. I think it really just gives me hope for what's to come.
Who is your go-to advisor when making difficult decisions or thinking through a new strategy?
Well, I criticize my husband for being a baseball player, so I will give him a compliment as well. He is the CEO of the National Wildlife Federation. So we very much are one another's executive coaches. I think we both have, the similar experiences of running national nonprofits that are, kind of big tents, and they, cover and represent the reddest of reddest areas and the bluest of bluest areas. So to me, that's kind of where we need to be as a country, is to bring people together, to have these hard discussions. And so it's been nice to sort of bounce ideas off of him, see his experience, as we oftentimes are going through the same, types of pain points.
Thank you, Krish. You were truly a knockout. You did great. I'm so happy that you would participate on this podcast with me.
So appreciate the opportunity. Some hard-hitting questions, some of which I wanted to duck, but I really, such an important conversation to have at this moment. And thank you for your partnership.
As always, you can find all interviews on our podcast website. Subscribe to In the Ring on YouTube and follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn so you don't miss any of these important updates and interviews in the future. Thank you again, Chris, and thank you to our sponsor, M3. Con mucho cariño, with much affection. Bye.